The story The Blue Bead by Norah Burke begins with the mention of a crocodile. This is not a simple reptile, and therefore the writer has chosen to give a detailed description of it. This crocodile is gigantic in size. From the very beginning of the story, it creates a sense of awe among the readers. The mention of the black water and whirlpools are suggestive of something ominous and fearful. The words to describe this enormous reptile are carefully chosen. It was twice the length of a tall man. The terrible size is also indicative of the tremendous strength of the reptile. Hence, the readers can anticipate danger from the very first line of the story. This particular crocodile lived in the depths of the river and came out on the sandbanks stealthily looking for its prey. It would come with utmost quiet and remained unnoticed till it had its victim in the grip of its terrible jaws. The enormity and the ferocity of the crocodile are reflected in the expression antediluvian saurian. The word antediluvian means very ancient, while saurian means reptile. The writer further describes this terrible crocodile as a prehistoric juggernaut. Prehistoric means primitive, while juggernaut means extremely powerful. The writer has used quite heavy expressions just to give us an idea that the reptile was not something that one could ignore. It was like an evil force that lurked in the dark water, waiting patiently for its next prey. Then the writer mentions how this crocodile had struggled to survive right from the time it hatched out from its eggs 100 years ago. Existence had not been easy for it. It too had escaped the birds of prey and the great carnivorous fishes that devour baby crocodiles. And then all these years it had fought to survive, feeding on rotten food. Now it was close to being invincible. Only its eyes and soft underarms made the crocodile vulnerable. Otherwise its hide was impenetrable even by a rifle bullet. This crocodile of tremendous strength and power fed on fishes, deer, monkeys that came to drink water at the river. It also fed on ducks. Sometimes a dog, body full of parasites, a skeleton cow were the preys of the mugger crocodile. Where the crocodile often ventured, there lay in the water a blue gem. Nothing special, just a small piece of glass perforated right through. It was a blue bead which plays an important role in the story, and therefore it is also the title of the story. The writer then shifts her focus towards the noisy village where a little girl lived. Her name was Sibia, who is the central character of the story. She and her family lived in abject poverty. The very basic necessities of life were beyond their reach. Sibia was thin and dressed in an earth-colored rag. When she is first introduced to us, Sibia was having her frugal, which means very less in amount, meal of chapati, and rancid, which means stale-smelling butter. The family even lacked fresh food. Sibia, however, did not quite think much of their poor condition. She had accepted her state and therefore went about her duties with a readiness. Sibia's appearance has been drawn vividly by Norah Burke, just the way she has thrown a clear spotlight on the crocodile. Similarly, she has portrayed Sibia. The little protagonist of the story had ebony hair and large eyes. Her skin was like oiled brown cream. This appearance shows that Sibia is very much Indian. Earth-colored rag or brown-colored skin gives her a closeness to Mother Nature. Norah Burke describes her as a happy, immature child woman. She has used the term child woman because this little girl had to undertake certain responsibilities. Although 12 years old, Sibia performed hard labor to help her family. The little fanciful objects like colorful blown glass beads, shining thin bangles that delight a child were way beyond Sibia's reach. While visiting the bazaar of the little town with her family, Sibia had come across shops that sold fineries. Luxurious items, delicious-looking sweets, wonderfully smelling cotton clothes filled her with amazement. However, she never felt sad at not having these items. She was always happy. Scarcity and hard labor, like husking corn, gathering sticks, putting dung to dry, Fetching water, etc., had made Sibia very tough from inside. Hence, although she was very young, she had enormous courage, strength, and spirit. The odds and obstacles were just a part of life for her, and she faced them with ease. The writer then gradually moves towards the most important part of the story. We find that Sibia, one day with her mother and a few other women of the village, headed for the cliffs on the opposite side of the river. They were going to get paper grass and sell it to the agent at the railhead, who in turn would sell them to the paper factories. Some of the women in the group wore necklaces made from the red-colored seeds that were found everywhere in the forest. The author has used the Indian term lal lal beejas. These necklaces looked fine. Little Sibia was making one for herself as well, but her family needle had snapped and so she had to wait for a new one. Why? Because these seeds were extremely hard and they had to be perforated with a needle. As the party moved on, they passed a Gujar encampment. The Gujars were a nomadic group who settled for some time at a place, and once their cattle had grazed enough, they had done enough business of milk and white butter, or they had already sold their young male buffaloes for tiger bait, they moved on to another place. Being an observant girl, Sibia watched how the Gujar women dressed or wore their ornaments minutely. The women moved on to the other side safely, for they talked a lot and made a lot of noise. Crocodiles were afraid of noise and therefore there was no chance of any attack. Once on the other side, all the women, including Sibia, got busy with their work of cutting grass. This place again and the surrounding sites, especially the river banks that could be seen from the top of the hill, were not unfamiliar territories to Sibia. She had played there as a child. Now it was time to go back home. Sibia hung back a little more. She had made a few clay cups and they were left to be dried. Now they were ready to be painted. The women had completed their day's work. They were tired and they now headed home. Their walk was slower because of their load, but they continued talking and shouted to each other in order to be heard. As a result, they crossed the river safely and disappeared up the tracks. There was silence all around. The darkness of the evening was setting in. Sibia was now all alone. She stepped on the stones, she was loaded with grass, and she was exhausted. She rested for a while on the boulders. Just at that moment, on the opposite bank, a Gujar woman came with 2 brass gurras to collect water. And in that deep silence, the crocodile emerged from the dark water and made a ferocious attack on the woman. It had got the woman's legs in its deadly jaws, and the Gujar woman, owing to the suddenness of the attack, screamed in terror and pain. The monster crocodile, it seemed, was determined to take the woman into the deep ends of the river. Sibia got up. The writer uses the word sprang to show Sibia's presence of mind and her readiness to face danger. She jumped from boulder to boulder, ignoring the difficulties, and within moments she was beside the shrieking woman. The bloody water, the largeness of the crocodile, the terror-stricken screaming woman were enough to rattle anybody's nerves. But Sibia was fearless. She was born in the forest. Poverty, scarcity, everyday dangers had made her immune to risks and life-threatening events. She knew the weakness of the crocodile, hence she aimed for its eyes. With all her force, she drove in the hair fork into the eyes, and one of the prongs went straight in. The crocodile writhed in pain, and leaving the woman, it disappeared into the bloody water. That mortal wound would kill the crocodile, and most probably after some time its body would be found bloated and rotten. Now the danger was over. Sibia took the half-conscious woman to the camp where the people made arrangements to take her to a doctor. Sibia again goes back to the riverside to collect her things. Still she had no fear of the crocodile, and then in the darkness of the water she finds the blue bead, and her heart is filled with immense joy. Every memory of the danger that she faced just a while ago, every risk she took, simply melted away. The joy on finding the blue bead was no less than the finding of a valuable treasure. As Sibia headed back, the writer carefully shows how the path towards her hut was full of other dangers. There were wriggle marks of snakes on the dust, there were malaria-spreading mosquitoes Moreover, that place was often frequented by an old tuskless elephant. But Sibia did not mind any of them. She did not even ponder about the utmost danger that she faced just a while ago. She saved the Gujar woman without thinking about her own safety. Her only delight was that she had found a blue stone that was perforated right in the middle, an excellent substitute for a proper pendant. When Sibia's anxious mother came running back to find her daughter, the very first thing that she told her mother was not her brave fight with the crocodile, but that she had found a blue bead for her necklace. Character analysis. Sibia, she is the central character of the story. Sibia is a 12-year-old girl who lived in a small hut in the forest with her family. They were extremely poor and did not have enough food or proper clothes to wear. Like the other members of the family, Sibia too toiled hard for survival. She had never had the simplest of items that delights a child. The author therefore calls her a child woman because at that little age she shouldered huge responsibilities. However, this tremendous poverty, scarcity, and incessant struggle for survival had toughened her from inside. The forest posed all sorts of dangers and threats from animals, snakes, malaria-spreading mosquitoes. Above all, the ferocious mugger crocodile that lurked in the dark water of the river was a constant threat. But all these risk factors had become a part of everyday existence for Sibia. That is why she remained fearless when pitched against danger. She did not panic on seeing the monstrous crocodile and its ferocity. With readiness and calm of mind, that little girl fought with the reptile and aimed for its most vulnerable body part, its eyes, and gave it a severe mortal wound. She helped the Gujar woman back to her camp and went back to collect her things, still without any fear. As she headed back home, the writer mentions that still the path to her cottage in the darkness of the forest posed other similar threats from snakes, malaria-spreading mosquitoes, and the tuskless Makna elephant that often frequented that place in the darkness. But Sibia never bothered about any of this. She is not only a brave girl, but we see that she has no greed at all. She is happy with whatever she has in her life. She had seen all the fine items in the market shops, but never cared about them. She had no sadness, and she found joys in little things like clay cups, necklaces made from seeds, and therefore the blue bead becomes an immense treasure for her. Sibia is someone who is full of life, positivity, cheerfulness, and fearlessness.